Moving on to our next lesson, it's lesson 8, Informative Evaluation of Learning in Social Sciences. Instructional goals and objectives play a very important role in both instructional process and assessment process. This serves as a guide for both teaching and learning process, communicate the purpose of instruction to other stakeholders, and to provide guidelines for assessing the performance of the students. Assessing the learning outcomes of students is one of the very critical functions of teachers. A classroom teacher should classify the objectives of the lesson because it is very important for the selection of the teaching method and the selection of the instructional materials. The instructional materials should be appropriate for the lesson so that the teacher can motivate the students properly. The objectives can be classified according to the learning outcomes of the lesson that will be discussed. This lesson has indicated the 3 domains of Bloom's taxonomy and the revision made by Krathwohl, relevant to the construction of tests. Moving on, let's try to know the purposes of instructional goals and objectives. The purposes of the instructional goals and objectives is to provide direction for the instructional process by clarifying the intended learning outcome. As they say, instructional goals and objectives are the heart of instruction. When well written, goals and objectives will help identify course content, structure the lecture, and guide the selection of meaningful and relevant activities and assessments. Kapag clear ang iyong goals and objectives, matutulungan mo yung mga estudyante mo na maintindihan kung ano ba yung dapat nilang matutunan and ano yung kailangan nilang gawin. Therefore, they provide you with a solid foundation for designing relevant activities and assessment. And take note, activities and assessment and grading should be based on the objectives. Kailangan mag-match yung objective mo dun sa activity and assessment na ibibigay mo sa mga students mo. And as you develop a learning objective, you have to determine what you want the students to learn and how will you know that they learned. Okay? Second, it conveys instructional intent to other stakeholders such as the students, parents, school officials, and the public. Of course, it's really important to let your students know the day-to-day objectives of the lesson para alam nila kung na-meet ba nila yung objectives na goal mo sa day na yun. And the last one, it provides basis for assessing the performance of the students by describing the performance to be measured. So, yung instructional objective or the objectives itself, yun ang magiging basis mo para i-assess yung performance ng students and dun rin magre-rely yung gagamitin mong assessment tool and yung gagamitin mong activity. By the way, what do we mean by objective? Objectives are the foundation upon which you can build lessons and assessments that can prove that you meet your overall course or lesson goals. Ano ba ang example ng mga objective? Ganito ang example ng mga objectives. The student should be able to compare and contrast demand and supply. At the end of the 45 minutes lecture, the student should be able to identify what are the different provinces in the Philippines. Ganon ang example ng objective. At ito yung nakikita natin sa lesson plan. There are 3 types of objectives. We have cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Moving on to the taxonomy of educational objectives. What is this taxonomy? A taxonomy is primarily useful in developing the types of learning outcomes that should be considered when developing a comprehensive list of objectives for classroom instruction. Okay, sa taxonomy ng educational objectives, nakilala si Benjamin Bloom. Okay, he is a well-known psychologist and educator, and he took the initiative to lead in formulating and classifying the goals and objectives of the educational processes. The 3 domains of educational activities were determined: the cognitive domain, affective domain, and the psychomotor domain. Okay, isa-isahin natin. Okay, when we say cognitive domain, it refers to the mental activity. For example, memorizing, reading, problem solving, analyzing, synthesizing, and drawing conclusions. Okay, when we say pag-cognitive kasi, it's pag-iisip. Okay, and then next we have affective domain. Ito naman sa affective domain, in-emphasize nito yung emotion, yung feeling. Okay, the last one, we have psychomotor domain. It refers to the physical skills of students. Okay, ito yung physical movement nila, coordination, and use of the motor skill areas. Okay, it focuses on the physical and kinesthetic skills of the learner. Okay, so para mas madali nyo maintindihan yung cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, kapag cognitive, it talks about the mind. Okay, pag-iisip. Kapag affective naman, sa heart yan, feeling ng estudyante. Pag psychomotor naman, ito yung skill ng bata. Okay, sa Bloom's taxonomy, nagkaroon ng revision. Si Lauren Anderson, na former student ni Benjamin Bloom, kasama si Krathwohl, ni-revise nila yung Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive domain in the mid-90s in order to fit the more outcome-focused modern education objectives. So, may dalawang changes na nangyari. The names in the 6 categories from noun to active verb. From noun, naging verb na siya. And second, the arrangement of the order of the last 2 highest levels. So, as you can see to this picture, 1956, nagawa ni Benjamin Bloom yung kanyang taxonomy, and then noong 2001 na-revise ito ni Krathwohl at ni Anderson. So from noun, naging verb na siya. From knowledge, naging remembering, comprehension, understanding, application, applying, analysis, analyzing, and then yung dalawang nagkabaliktad. From synthesis, naging evaluating, and from evaluation, naging creating. Okay, isa-isahin natin. Sa knowledge level, it is the lowest level of thinking. So, more on remembering lang to ng information and retrieving of previously learned material. Ano mga verb na pwede natin gamitin under knowledge level kapag kayo ay gagawa ng objectives? Of course, identify, you relate, list, define, recall, memorize, repeat, record, name, recognize, acquire. Okay? So, yun yung mga verbs na pwede nyong gamitin kapag gagawa kayo ng instructional objectives sa knowledge. And then, dun sa revision ni Krathwohl, naging remembering na siya. Same pa rin ng thought. Okay? Andun pa rin yung recalling of information, memorizing. Okay? And these are the verbs na pwede nyong gamitin. For example, sa knowledge level, the student should be able to identify the different provinces in Region 2. And that will fall under knowledge level or remembering level dahil nire-recall lang ni student yung kanyang natutunan. Another one, the student should be able to define demand and supply. Okay, so this will fall under remembering and knowledge level kasi ide-define lang ni student kung ano yung pagkakaintindi niya sa demand and supply or yung definition ng demand and supply. The second level, comprehension, na napalitan ng understanding. Okay, when we say comprehension, its literal meaning is to understand. Okay, maintindihan. Ano ba yung naintindihan ng bata dun sa lesson nyo? Ano mga verbs na pwede natin gamitin? Restate, locate, report, recognize, explain, express, identify, discuss, describe, review, infer, conclude, illustrate, interpret, draw, represent, differentiate. So, kung i-compare natin yung understanding dun sa remembering, this is somehow higher level of mental ability than remembering. So, ano mga pwede nating objectives under understanding? For example, the student should be able to summarize the story of the moth. Pwede yun. Another one, the student should be able to explain the law of demand and supply. Pwede rin ganun. Okay, moving on to the third level, it's application na napalitan ng applying. Okay? Pag sinabi natin application, it's the ability of the student to use learned material or to implement material in a new and concrete situations. From the word itself, to apply. I-apply na dito ni student kung ano yung natutunan niya dun sa lesson. Ano mga pwede nating verbs na gamitin? Of course, to apply, relate, develop, translate, use, operate, organize, employ, restructure, interpret, demonstrate, illustrate, practice, calculate, show, exhibit, dramatize. So, these are the verbs na pwede nyong gamitin kapag kayo ay gagawa ng instructional objective. Example of application as an objective, the student should be able to demonstrate the process of evaporation. Pwedeng ganun. Next level, we have analysis. Okay, it's the ability to break down or distinguish the parts of the material into their components so that their organizational structure may be better understood. When we say analysis, it's the ability of the student to break down whole informations into pieces. For example, meron kang whole cake, and then what you're gonna do is to break that cake or hatiin yung cake na yan into smaller pieces. That is the concept of analysis. You're breaking informations into smaller ideas. Okay? Mga verbs na pwede natin gamitin kapag tayo gagawa ng analysis objective. Of course, to analyze, compare, probe, inquire, examine, contrast, categorize, differentiate, and so much more. For example, the students should be able to analyze the event of 1872 Cavite Mutiny. So, ang gagawin ng mga students dito, to break down nila lahat ng nangyari noong 1872 Cavite Mutiny. The students should be able to compare and contrast Philippine Revolution to American Revolution. Pwedeng ganun. Next level, we have synthesis. It's the ability to put parts together to form a coherent or unique new whole. So, ang kabaliktaran kasi ng synthesis ay yung analysis. Kung kanina, ang example ko ay cake na buo and then hatiin sa kapira-piraso. Ito namang synthesis, the ability to put parts. So, yung mga cake kanina na maliliit na hinati-hati na, pagsasama-samahin mo yun, to make a new or to make a whole part. Okay? Pagtatagpi-tagpiin mo ngayon lahat ng informations para matawag natin or masabi natin na siya ay synthesis. What are the verbs under this level? Compose, produce, design, assemble, create, prepare, predict, and so much more. Okay, ito yung pang 5th level ni Bloom, synthesis. Kaya lang nung kay Krathwohl na kung ano yung pang 6th level or the last level ni Bloom na evaluation, nilipat niya sa pang 5th. Okay, so yung ka-level ng synthesis, naging evaluating na. Of course, hindi na bago sa inyo yung term na evaluating. Our subject is assessment and evaluation. When we say evaluating, it's the ability to judge or make judgment about material or about certain product. And moving on to the last level ni Bloom, which is evaluation, the ability to judge. Kaya lang, nung kay Krathwohl, naging creating. So, nagkabaliktad lang. Okay? Sa Bloom Taxonomy, ang highest level niya, evaluation. Pero kay Krathwohl, yung synthesis ni Bloom na pang 5th, nilagay niya sa pang 6 niya. Okay? Kaya lang napalitan. Hindi na siya synthesis, it's creating. Okay? From the word itself, creating, the students should be able to create, to compose, to construct a new product or a new idea. Pwedeng ganun. Same thought din ang creating dun sa synthesis. Kasi sa synthesis kanina, sinabi ko na yung pinagtagpi-tagping information ay pinagsasama-sama para makabuo ng isang idea or isang product. Ganun din sa creating. Okay? Putting elements together to form a coherent or functional whole. Same thought lang sila, nagkaiba lang ng pwesto, ng position, nagkaiba lang din ng term, pero yung concept niya almost the same. Okay, ano mga pwede nating objectives sa creating? The student should be able to compose a song about COVID-19 pandemic. Pwedeng ganun. The student should be able to generate their own formula using blah blah blah. Okay, so this is just a recall of what I discussed to you a while ago. Anong pinaka-lowest level sa cognitive domain ni Bloom? It's knowledge. Knowledge recognizes students' ability to use rote memorization and recall certain facts. Okay? Yung mga test questions under knowledge level ay nag-focus lang sa identification and recalling of information. Okay, anong pwede nating instructional objective? At the end of the topic, the students should be able to identify the different steps in testing hypothesis. Anong pwede mo maging test question? What are the different steps in testing hypothesis? Okay, so i-recall na ni student kung ano yung mga steps bago siya maka-create ng isang hypothesis. Okay? Moving on to the second, comprehension involves the student's ability to read course content, interpret information, and put others' ideas into words. Okay, anong pwede nyo maging instructional objective? At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to summarize the main events of the story Invictus in grammatically correct English. Anong pwede mo maging test item? Summarize the main events in the story Invictus in grammatically correct English. Okay, this will fall under comprehension or understanding kasi base dun sa naintindihan ng student sa kwento ng Invictus, isusulat niya na ngayon. Isa-summarize niya na yung important events or main events ng story. Next, we have application. The students should take new concepts and apply them to new situation. Anong pwede niyong instructional objective? At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to write a short poem using the haiku format. Anong test item? Write a short poem using the haiku format. Okay, so dito ina-apply na ni student yung natutunan nila about sa pag-construct ng isang tula using haiku format. Next, we have analysis, the ability of the students to take new information and break it down into parts. Okay, yung example ko kanina na cake. Ano pwede nyo maging objective? At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to describe the statistical tools needed in testing the difference between two means. Test item. What kind of statistical test would you run to see if there is a significant difference between pre-test and post-test? Next, synthesis. The ability to take various pieces of information and form a whole, creating a pattern. So, yung kanina ulit, yung sa cake, yung nahati-hating cake, pagsasama-samahin mo yung para makabuo ng isang buong cake. Okay, ang inyong magiging instructional objective, at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to compose a song about COVID-19 pandemic. Ano magiging test item mo? Compose a song about COVID-19 pandemic. Kasi dito pa lang, mag-iisip na sila kung ano yung mga pwedeng words, anong pwedeng mga linya, pwede nilang ilagay or isipin para makapag-construct sila ng song about COVID-19 pandemic. And the last one, evaluation, the ability to judge. Anong pwede mong maging instructional objective? At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to evaluate the legalization of marijuana to be used for medical purposes. Test item, what do you think about legalizing of marijuana to be used for medical purposes? So here, i-judge na nila kung dapat bang illegalize yung paggamit ng marijuana for medical purposes. Okay, moving on to the next domain, we have affective domain. As I mentioned to you earlier, it refers to the feeling, emotion, degree of acceptance, or rejection. Okay, the first level of affective domain, according to Krathwohl, or based on the taxonomy of Krathwohl, is receiving. It refers to being aware or sensitive to the existence of certain ideas, materials, or phenomena and being able to tolerate them. The learners are willing to listen. Okay, ano example natin dito? Yung pakikinig ng mga estudyante sa'yo. For example, yung ginagawa nyo ngayon, nakikinig kayo sa lecture ko. This will fall under receiving level. For example, umattend kayo ng seminar about cigarette smoking and then nakikinig lang kayo sa lecturer. That will fall under receiving level. Okay? You are just there to listen sa idea. Next, we have responding. Pag-respond. Okay? It refers to the commitment in some measure to the ideas, materials, or phenomena involved by actively responding to them. Okay, the learning outcomes emphasize compliance in responding, willingness to respond, or satisfaction in responding. The learners are willing to participate. For example, sa isang classroom, nagpa-activity ka, nagpa-participate ang mga bata, nagbigay ka ng isang activity, that will fall under responding kasi nagpa-participate ang mga bata sa'yo. For example, dun sa seminar kanina about cigarette smoking na in-example ko, nagtanong yung lecturer at sinagot niyo yung tanong niya, ibig sabihin, you responded. The third level, we have valuing. It refers to the willingness to be perceived by others as valuing certain ideas, materials, phenomenon, or behavior. Example demonstrates belief in democratic process. Another example under valuing level shows the ability to solve problems. Okay, para mas maintindihan nyo, when we say valuing, we give word, we are giving our own stand towards an issue. So, kung i-compare natin siya sa cognitive target, para siyang under the evaluation level. Bakit? Because you are giving value to something. Example ko ulit yung kanina, attending a seminar about cigarette smoking. Dito is parang nagkakaroon ka na ng evaluation. Pero ako, I believe that smoking is really dangerous for your health. That is my opinion. Pero kapag tatanungin mo yung ibang tao, maaring iba yung kanilang value. Iba yung kanilang pag-evaluate sa smoking. Right? Okay? So, dito sa valuing kasi, meron ka ng sariling paninindigan. Meron kang sariling viewpoint. Next, we have organization or organizing. It refers to the ability to relate the value to those already held and bring it into a harmonious and internally consistent philosophy. Okay, for example, explains the role of systematic planning in solving problems. Another prioritizes time effectively to meet the needs of the organization, family, and self. Okay, there are two things that we organize: people and ideas. Okay, I repeat, it's people and ideas. For instance, I value that smoking is really dangerous for our health. So, under ako ng valuing. And then, I am going to find other people who have the same values as I have. For instance, si Michael, naniniwala siya na smoking is not good for your health also. Tinanong ko rin si Andrea, and same kami ng paniniwala that smoking is not good for your health. And then tinanong ko pa yung ibang tao, and then they also believe na smoking ay hindi maganda sa health. So, ang ginawa ko, inorganize ko itong mga tao na to, and I create an organization which is called People Against Smoking. Okay, kung i-compare natin siya sa cognitive level, this will fall under synthesis. And the last level, we have characterization by value or value set, or in short term, characterization. It incorporates ideas completely into practice recognized by the use of them. The value system that controls their behavior. Instructional objectives are concerned with the students' general patterns of adjustment such as personal, social, and emotional. The learners are willing to change one's behavior, lifestyle, or way of life. Sa madaling salita, when we say characterization, it means living according to your values. Meaning to say, yung pinaniniwalaan mo ay isinasabuhay mo na talaga. For instance, if you believe that it is important to recycle some of the garbages that you have, that is your value. Then under characterizing or characterization, the objective is for the students to segregate waste materials at home. So kung i-compare natin siya sa cognitive domain, this will fall under application level. Okay? Yung pinaniniwalaan mo, isinasabuhay mo na talaga, ina-apply mo na. The last domain, we have psychomotor. It refers to the mastery of physical skills, okay? Physical movement, coordination, and use of motor skill. So the first level under psychomotor domain, we have perception, okay? The ability to use sensory cues to guide motor activity. Okay, for example, you detect nonverbal communication cues. Another, estimate where a ball will land after it is thrown and then moving to the correct location to catch the ball. Ano mga pwede nating verbs na gamitin under perception level? Chooses, describes, detects, differentiates, distinguishes, identifies, isolates, relates, and selects. Next level, we have set, your readiness to act. Okay, it includes mental, physical, and emotional sets. For example, the student shows his or her desire to learn a new process. Okay, what are the verbs under this level? Begins, display, explains, moves, proceeds, reacts, shows, states, and volunteers. And the next level, we have guided response. Okay, so under this level, meron ng imitation, trial, and error. For example, si student, pinag-perform mo siya ng mathematical equation, okay, as demonstrated by the teacher. Pwede ring he follows or she follows instructions to build a model. But of course, it's really important na nandito pa rin yung demonstration ni teacher. Okay, kasi nga i-imitate niya or gagayahin niya yung process na ginawa ni teacher. Next, we have mechanism. This is the intermediate stage in learning a complex skill. Okay, yung learned responses nagiging habitual na siya and the movements can be performed with some confidence and proficiency. So yung kanina na guided response, it is based dun sa ginawa ni teacher, okay, ginagaya ni student. And dito kasi sa mechanism, andito na yung confidence and yung proficiency ni student. For example, the student uses a personal computer. Another one, he or she repairs a leaking faucet. And last one, he or she drives a car. Next level, we have complex overt response. Okay, so the skillful performance of motor acts that involves complex movement patterns. Okay, for example, si student, he or she operates a computer quickly and accurately. Okay, dito na, kung kanina, gumagamit, dun sa mechanism, gumagamit lang si student ng personal computer. Dito naman, nag-ooperate na siya ng computer. Okay, take note, quickly and accurately. And then another one displays competence while playing the piano. Next level, we have adaptation. Skills are well developed. An individual can modify movement patterns to fit special requirements. Example, the student responds effectively to unexpected experiences. Another example, the teacher modifies instruction to meet the needs of the learners. The last one, we have origination. Creating new movement patterns to fit a particular situation or specific problem. Okay, dito naman na-emphasize na yung creativity based upon highly developed skills. For example, the student creates a new gymnastic routine. Moving on to the next lesson, preparing for assessment of cognitive learning. Prior to the construction of paper and pencil tests to be used in the measurement of cognitive learning, teachers have to answer the following questions. Okay, what should be tested? What emphasis to give to the various objectives taught? Whether to administer a paper and a pencil test or observe each student directly, how long the test should take, and how best to prepare students for testing. First question, what should be tested? Kailangan ma-identify mo yung information, yung skill, and behavior na kailangan mong i-test. Okay? And ito yung pinaka-important decision na dapat i-consider ni teacher. Okay, knowledge of what shall be tested will enable a teacher to develop an appropriate test for the purpose. Take note ha, testing emphasis should parallel teaching emphasis. Okay, kung ano itinuro mo sa klase, yun din dapat yung i-test mo or yun yung content ng iyong test. And take note also, laging magre-rely sa objectives. Next question, how to gather information about what to test. Si teacher kailangan niya mag-decide whether he or she should give a paper and pencil test or simply gather information. In what way? Through observation. Okay? Gagamit ba siya ng paper and pencil test? For example, multiple choice, matching type, true or false, or magpapa-performance test na lang siya through observation. But you have to consider your decision must rely dun sa objective mo pa rin at saka sa nature or behavior to be tested. Next question, how long the test should be? Okay, dito na i-consider natin ibang factors, age and attention span of the students and the type of question. For example, ang hawak mong level ay nasa elementary ka, grade 1, hindi ka pwedeng magpa-essay sa mga grade 1. And consider also yung kanilang attention span. Okay? Majority ng mga bata, mababa lang ang kanilang attention span. Okay? Mabilis sila yung mainip. Pero kung sa college naman or high school, pwede ka magpa-essay sa kanila. Okay? You have to consider yung kanilang age at saka yung attention span. At saka yung type of questions din pala. Next question, how best to prepare students for testing? Ang mga estudyante ay mabigyan ng magandang instruction. Pangalawa, kailangan mong i-review ang mga students bago ka magpa-test. Then the third one, familiarizing students with question formats. Kailangan inform mo rin yung mga students mo kung paano ka ba magpa-test, ano bang type of test mo, and yung format ng yung questions. Next, na kailangan natin i-consider yung schedule ng test. Napakasimple, okay? And then the last one, you provide students information about the test. Ilang minutes ba nila iti-take yung exam or yung quiz? What type of test? Ano yung content ng test mo? Anong topic yung coverage? Those are the informations na kailangan mong sabihin sa students mo. Okay, so these are the behaviors measured and assessed in the cognitive domain. Na-discuss na natin to, so hindi na natin siya i-discuss. But we have 6 levels. Of course, knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Okay, next, we have assessing cognitive learning. Si teacher gumagamit siya ng 2 types of test yan to assess the learning of students under cognitive domain. Meron tayong objective test. When we say objective test, ito yung mga test na nagre-require lang ng isang answer. For example, multiple choice, true or false, matching type, so much more. Then, the other type, we have subjective test. Sa subjective test, dito na natin malalaman at makikita yung essay or under subjective test kasi, essay lang din naman. Pag nagbigay kasi ng subjective test, especially kung essay yan, the student has the freedom to respond dun sa question mo based on how he or she feels it should be answered. Moving on to the next, behaviors measured and assessed in psychomotor domain. Okay, the psychomotor domain of learning is focused on processes and skills. Okay, so therefore, ang tinitignan sa psychomotor domain ay performance. Ano bang mga example ng performance? Kapag kayo ay nasa field na ng teaching later on, kapag gusto nyo sa performance-based or performance assessment sa mga bata, pwede kayong magpakanta, singing a song, drawing, dancing, playing a musical instrument, mga speeches, declamation. There are 2 approaches that teachers can use in measuring the acquisition of motor and oral skills in the classroom. Pwedeng observation sa performance ng mga bata at pwede ring evaluation ng mga projects ng students. So, sa psychomotor domain, pwede kasing magpa-performance ka, pwede ring namang product yung ipagawa mo sa kanila. Okay. Observation of student performance. It's an assessment approach in which the learner does the desired skill in the presence of the teacher. In this approach, the teacher observes the performance of the student. Okay. So, dito naman, inobserbahan ni teacher yung performance ni student. Okay. For example, kayo, isa-isa kayong nagpa-perform and then si teacher nyo nandun sa harap, ina-assess kayo, inoobserbahan kayo. And then right after that, magbibigay si teacher ng feedback. Okay, sa observation of student performance, pwedeng holistic or atomistic or analytic. Okay? Sa holistic observation, in-employ to kapag si teacher gusto niyang magbigay ng score or feedback based on pre-established prototypes of how an outstanding, average, or deficient performance looks. And then yung second type naman observation, pwedeng analytic. Okay? This requires that a task analysis be conducted in order to identify the major subtasks involved in the student performance. Okay, para mas madali niyong maintindihan, ang nire-refer dito is yung rubrics. Sa rubrics kasi, we have 2 types, analytic and holistic. Pag sinabi mong holistic, ito ay general, all criterion evaluated simultaneously. Okay? And ang advantage kasi ng holistic rubric, mabilis kang mag-score and then magiging maganda yung summative assessment. Ang disadvantage nito, it does not communicate what to improve. So, hindi mo mabibigyan ng feedback si student kung ano ba yung mga dapat niya pang i-improve. Okay? Hindi siya masyadong na-emphasize yung bawat criteria na binigay mo dun sa rubric mo. Okay? And not a good formative also. Sa analytic kasi, bawat criteria ay ina-evaluate separately. Ano mga advantages nito? Nadadiagnose niya yung mga information kung saan ba medyo weak si student or saan siya strong. Pangalawa, it gives formative feedback, and then it links instruction, adaptable, ability to combine scores. Disadvantage, time-consuming siya. Okay? So, I will show you some examples of holistic and analytic rubric. So, this is an example of holistic rubric. Kung mapapansin nyo, meron lang 4 na numbers dito. Okay? So, kung ako ay nakadepende dito sa rubric na to, titingnan ko lang kung na-meet ba ni student yung criteria na binigay ko sa holistic. Okay? And then, kapag analytic kasi, ayan, as you can see, bawat criteria ay na-specify. Okay, for example, foreground, middle ground, background, and then may mga corresponding numbers na dito. Okay, kailan ba kayo gagamit ng holistic at analytic rubric? Gagamit lang kayo ng holistic rubric kapag yung performance na binigay nyo ay mabilis lang ang deadline. For example, simple lang. Okay, and then next week deadline na. Pero kung yung performance na binigay nyo ay good siya for 1 semester, na kailangan nilang tapusin at medyo mahirap yung pinapagawa nyo, then use analytic rubric para mabigyan ng justice yung efforts ng mga bata. Okay, another one, hindi lang naman performance ang pwede nyong i-evaluate sa psychomotor. Pwede kayong magpagawa ng product. When we say product, ang papasok na sa isip nyo dito, it's the portfolio. Okay, for example, sa portfolio nila, i-include nila doon yung mga activities nila, drawing nila, models, construction, paper products, and so much more. Okay, when we say portfolio, it's a compilation, it's a collection of the student's work. Okay? So, dito makikita natin yung progress ni student. Okay? From, for example, sa first grading to fourth grading, makikita mo kung paano siya nag-improve sa kanyang performance. Okay? And sa portfolio kasi, ilalagay niya yung mga best work niya rito. According to Irishan, there are 4 steps na kailangan mong i-consider kapag ikaw ay gagamit ng performance assessment. Okay, first, establishing a clear purpose. Second, setting performance criteria. Third, creating an appropriate setting. And last one, forming scoring criteria or predetermined rating. Purpose, napaka-importante ng purpose. Bakit ka magpapa-portfolio assessment? Bakit ka magbibigay ng performance assessment? Okay, there is a need to determine beforehand the objective. Next, the teachers need to collaborate with their colleagues kapag mag-create ng criteria. O, pwede rin naman ganito. Kapag sa magpapa-performance based ka sa students mo, pwede kang humingi ng idea sa mga co-teachers mo kung ano yung mga criteria na dapat mong include sa rubric. Okay? And it's also important na involve mo rin yung students mo pag mag-create ka ng rubric sa kanilang performance. Okay? Hindi pwedeng ikaw ay authoritarian teacher. Kailangan makinig ka rin sa mga insights ng mga students mo. Okay, sa portfolio assessment kasi, it does not necessarily mean na written outputs lang siya. Pwede pa rin siyang physical performances or experiments kasi pwede siya maging photo documentation. Okay, i-compile lang nila. And lastly, scoring methods, napaka-importante. Kapag kayo ay magbibigay ng performance test sa mga bata, it's really important na meron kayong rubrics. Okay? Ipakita nyo yung rubrics sa mga bata para alam nila kung saan sila magpo-focus. For example, sa rubric mo, nakalagay doon, organization of ideas, creativity, and so much more. Ang pinakamataas mong percentage doon ay organization of ideas. So, si student, magpo-focus siya more on organization ng kanyang ideas, okay? Although, scoring of students' portfolio is time-consuming. The content of student portfolio, however, can be reported in the form of narrative. And then, meron tayong mga different tools na pwedeng gamitin para i-assess yung mga portfolio ng mga students. Okay, so now moving on to the tools for measuring acquisition of skills. Para ma-maintain ni teacher yung validity and reliability ng assessment task na binigay niya, kailangan niyang gumamit ng mga tools para hindi siya maging bias at maging objective siya sa pag-grade at pagre-rate ng performance ng student. The first tool, pwedeng rating scale. Okay? Ano ang rating scale? Napakasimple. It's a series of categories na naka-arrange siya in order of quality. Okay, this is an example of rating scale for lesson presentation. Direction, rate the student teacher on each of the skill areas specified below. Use the following code. 5, yung pinakamataas, it means outstanding. And then yung lowest ay 1, it needs improvement. Okay, ganito ang example ng rating scale. Si student teacher ba ay may audience contact? Okay, i-rate ngayon siya ng evaluators or kahit ng student. Pwedeng 4, pwedeng 3, 1, and so much more. And to Shazam, si teacher ba ay may enjoyment sa kanyang pagtuturo? Okay, i-rate din siya. Next, we have checklist also. List of criteria upon which a student's performance or end product is to be judged. Okay, from the word itself, checklist, mag-check lang si evaluator kung na-meet ba ni student or ni teacher yung isang criteria. For example, dito, displays interest in the experiment. Okay, napansin mo ba or na-observe mo ba na may interest sa student dun sa experiment? Pwedeng check or pwede mong i-leave na lang na walang nakalagay. Next, helps in setting up the experiment. Ayan. This is an example of checklist. Literal na mag-check lang si rater, okay, si evaluator, kung napansin niya or na-observe niya bang ginawa ito ni teacher or ni student. Another type ng checklist, pwedeng yes or no response lang din. Okay? Pag yes, it is done satisfactorily. Kapag no naman, unsatisfactorily. Okay, for example, check yes or no as to whether the specified criterion is met. Did the student use correct grammar? Yes or no? Did the student make clear presentation? Yes or no? Did the student stimulate interest? Yes or no? Okay, ganun lang ang checklist. Pwedeng yes or no lang din. Or pwede rin yung kanina na literal na mag-check ang mga student. Okay, next. Behaviors measured and assessed in the affective domain. Okay, let's be honest, nasa affective domain, napakahirap niyang i-measure or napakahirap i-evaluate ang emotion ng isang estudyante kasi hindi mo naman nakikita, right? But take note that there are also tools na pwedeng gamitin ni teacher para ma-assess yung affective domain ng mga students. Okay, so let's see. The first one is attitude scale. It's a form of rating scale containing statements desired to measure students' feelings on attitude or behavior. Ito ang example ng attitude scale. Okay? Ang highest dito ay SA or strongly agree, and the lowest strongly disagree. So ilalagay lang ni student kung SA, A, D, or ST. For example, I enjoy doing my assignments in mathematics. Ako, strongly disagree ako dyan, SD. Kaya ako nasa sockside. Next, the books we're using in the subjects is interesting. Agree. Okay, ganyan mag-evaluate ang student. Attitude scale. So, dito, ma-assess mo na talaga yung kanilang, okay, yung feeling nila. Kasi dito naman magpakatotoo ang mga student eh. Actually, na-enjoy rin ng mga bata yung sumagot ng mga ganito. Next questionnaire, pwede rin gamitin para i-assess yung affective domain ng mga bata. Okay, magre-react lang sila sa mga statements. For example, this class is boring, exciting, interesting, unpleasant, highly informative. So, pipili lang sila dyan, tapos i-check lang nila. I find science fun, interesting, very tiring, difficult, easy. Pipili lang sila dyan, then i-check nila. That is an example of questionnaire. Next, semantic differential, another type of response on questionnaire. Of course, this is also to assess attitudes, feelings, and opinions from very favorable to very unfavorable. Okay, ito ang example ng semantic differential. Working with my group members is interesting or boring. Parang antonym siya, magkabaliktad lang sila. Nasa dulo yung parehong criteria. And then, maglalagay lang dito si student ng mark. Next one, we have Likert scale. 5-point scale din siya, strongly agree and strongly disagree. So, this is an example of a Likert scale. Ito, student leaders have to work for the benefit of the students. Strongly disagree, agree, undecided, disagree, or strongly agree. So, almost the same lang siya sa may attitude scale na merong agree, disagree, and so much more. And the next one, we have simple projective techniques. Merong 3 types ang simple projective techniques. We have word association, na kung saan magbibigay ka lang ng isang word sa mga student and then magbibigay na sila ng opinion nila. For example, what comes into your mind upon hearing the word corruption? Pag narinig naman student yung corruption, marami na sila masusulat dyan na word. Okay? And then, when we say unfinished sentence, literal, magbibigay ka lang ng isang phrase and then sila na magtatapos. For example, given the chance to choose, I would blank. I am happy when blank. My greatest failure in life was blank. Okay, so dito ma-assess mo na yung feeling, emotion ng mga bata. Okay, magandang gamitin to sa mga students. Then last one ng type ng simple projective techniques, unfinished story. Literal, magbibigay ka ng kwento pero hindi tapos. Sila nang tatapos dun sa kwento. And then last one, we have self-expression techniques. Okay, dito naman, dito na papasok yung pwede kang magpagawa ng diary, essay, pwede kang magpagawa ng autobiography, self-expression techniques. So, dito, ina-express na nila yung kanilang emotion and views about issues. Okay, maganda rin siyang gamitin. Moving on to the last lesson, general guidelines for constructing evaluative instruments. Okay, general principles of testing. Okay, Number 1, measure all instructional objectives. Paulit-ulit kong sinasabi, dapat align ang objectives nyo sa learning assessment na gagamitin nyo at sa mga activity na ibibigay nyo sa mga students. Next, cover all learning tasks. A good task is not only focused on one type of objective, it must be truly representative of all targeted learning outcomes. That is why kapag gagawa kayo ng lesson plan, meron tayong 3 objectives or pwedeng sumobra ng 3. But make sure na meron dong psychomotor, merong affective, merong cognitive. Okay, hindi pwedeng mawala yun. Next one, use appropriate test items. Okay, kailangan yung test items mo ay congruent pa rin dun sa learning objectives mo. Kung objective mo, gusto mo makita yung skill ng bata sa pag-create ng essay, okay, yung kanilang skill sa pag-construct ng paragraph or ng mga sentences, then magpa-essay ka. Ang pwede mong gawing assessment doon, assessment tool ay essay. Okay. Next one, make test valid and reliable. When we say valid, again, it measures what it intends to measure. Reliable naman, it means the consistency of scores. Okay? For example, nagpa-quiz ako ngayon and then next week, i-administer ko ulit siya. Kaya lang, sa second week ng pag-administer ko, ni-revise ko ng question at the same time, pati yung mga choices. Masasabi kong valid siya kapag yung score ng mga students ko ngayon ay ganun din. Almost the same yung scores nila dun sa ipapa-quiz ko. Okay? Pero kung hindi na siya same, it means hindi valid yung test. Okay? And then reliable, kapag yung score ng student ko ngayon ay almost the same at hindi nagkakalayo dun sa score nila, dun sa next na ipapaquiz ko. Therefore, the quiz is reliable. Next one, use test to improve learning. Okay. It's really important na kapag kayo nagpapatest, magbigay kayo ng feedback sa mga students. Okay? Para alam nila kung saan sila dapat mag-focus, ano ba yung mga concepts na kailangang ituro ulit. Okay? To reteach concepts and skills na hindi na master ni student. Okay. And then next one, pahapiawin na lang natin to, attributes of a good test as an assessment tool. Paano mo masabi na ang isang assessment tool na gagamitin mo ay maganda? Okay? Okay, paulit-ulit, validity, it measures what it seeks to measure. Reliability, the accuracy or consistency of scores. Next, objectivity. When we say objectivity, walang bias or hindi subjective sa judgment. Kapag sinabihan ka one time na si teacher napaka-objective niya, ibig sabihin nun maganda yon kasi hindi ka bias as a teacher. Pero pag sinabihan ka na si teacher napaka-subjective, meaning to say may favoritism ka, hindi ka fair sa pag-judge or pag-evaluate sa mga students mo. Next, scorability. Kailangan ang quiz mo or exam mo ay madaling ma-check. Okay? And then, administrability, meaning to say, mabilis lang siyang i-administer, mabilis siyang ibigay sa mga students. Simple lang yung instructions mo. Okay? That is administrability. When you say relevance, yung kailangan relevant yung test mo dun sa purpose mo or sa objective mo. Next, balance. Okay? Kaya meron tayong TOS, Table of Specification. Meaning to say, kailangan yung mga questions mo sa test ay balanse. Kasi sa TOS, meron kayong makikita doon na cognitive domain. Okay? Nandun yung knowledge, andun yung remembering, andun yung understanding, andun yung analyzing, applying, evaluating, and creating. Okay? And dapat balance. Hindi pwede na lahat ng questions mo ay magfo-fall lang sa remembering. Kailangan binabalance mo yan. And later, sa semifinal, madidiscuss natin yung table of specifications. Efficiency. Okay, kailangan meaningful yung mga responses or yung mga questions. Okay, even the choices sa exam or sa quiz mo. Difficulty. Kailangan nakabase pa rin yung difficulty dun sa ability ng students. Okay? Kung grade 1 ang student mo, huwag ka na magpagbigay. Kung grade 1 ang student mo, huwag ka magbigay ng mga questions na hindi nila kayang sagutan. For example, yung mga modules ng DepEd today, not to criticize, pero majority ng mga content ngayon sa module ng DepEd ay hindi rin kayang sagutan ng mga elementary level. Kaya ang ending, pinapagawa rin nila sa iba. Discrimination. Sa discrimination, meron tayong tinatawag na norm reference test and criterion reference test. Sa norm reference test, kino-compare natin yung performance ni student or ng isang tao dun sa mga kasama niya. Okay? Kino-compare natin from person to person. Pag criterion, kino-compare natin yung performance ni student dun sa criteria. For example, sa LET, okay, Licensure Examination for Teachers or any type of board exam. For example, kasi sa LET, ang passing score ay 75. Okay, na-meet ba ni student or ni taker yung 75 nakapasa ba siya or hindi. That is criterion reference. Binabase natin doon sa criteria ng licensure examination for teachers. Paano naman yung mga top-notchers? Okay, that will fall under norm reference test. Kino-compare na natin yung performance ni top 1 until top 10. Okay? Ko yung kanilang rating, board exam rating. Fairness. Okay, kailangan fair ka sa pag-administer ng test. Okay, kailangan mayroong chance ang bawat students mo na ma-demonstrate yung kanilang skill. For example, hindi ka naman pwede mag-rely lang sa written test. Malay mo may mga student ka na magaling pala sa performance, magaling kumanta, magaling sa spoken poetry. Kailangang flexible si teacher pagdating sa mga assessment tool. Last one, steps in constructing classroom test. Ano bang magiging first step kapag kayo ay gagawa ng isang test or exam? Of course, the identification of instructional objectives, learning outcomes. After nyan, kapag alam mo na yung objective mo, i-list down mo na yung mga topics na magiging content ng test mo. Ano ba yung coverage ng exam mo? For example, sa prelim, 2 chapters ang na-cover mo. Therefore, dun ka lang kukuha ng mga topics na ilalagay mo sa exam. Pangatlo, the preparation of TOS, Table of Specification. Okay, sa TOS kasi, meron dong specified and allotted time. For example, sa chapter 1, 6 hours ko siyang diniscuss. Sa chapter 2, 3 hours lang. Therefore, dun sa 6 hours, kailangan mas maraming questions ang manggaling doon. Dapat nababalanse ko siya. Next one, type of test. Anong type of test bang gusto mo? Gusto mo lang bang mag-multiple choice? Or gusto mong combination ng multiple choice, matching type, true or false, etc. And then, pang 5th step, kailangan mo na mag-construct ng test question. Paggawa mo ng instruction. Okay? And then the last one, yung answer key na or yung scoring key. Okay, so that ends our lecture for midterm. This is just a summary of the lessons na in-upload ko sa LMS kasi nagmamadali rin tayo. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you have learned something.